Hey guys, this is Mr. Blue from CombineGaming. We're looking at a GVG here from Guild Wars 1. Basically what I want to take a look at here is a couple tactics that this team decides to use. Ends up being pretty effective. Not necessarily for these reasons, but it's a good way to think about the tactics that you may decide to use either for Guild Wars or for anything else. We have a flag stand battle here. This is what the bulk of any kind of GVG comes down to, is your kind of 8v8 mechanic. It's really kind of like a 7.5 because you have your flag runner going back and forth for the flag. But what this team decides to do, the blue team, they have a tactic here where they send a kind of like a split mesmer, is typically the term we'd use, off to go kill NPCs in the back door of the base. All bases here, no matter which map you're playing on, have two entrances, a front entrance as well as a back entrance. Typically the front entrance is the one that leads to the flag stand. That's where you see the main team fighting at for control of that flag stand. But here we have that one member going off to the back to kill NPCs. Now what's important about this is not the fact that she's killing NPCs. These NPCs ultimately are not that valuable. Basically all they do is protect the back door from the valuable ones. However, what this forces the red team to do is defend this back door to prevent her from ever getting to those valuable NPCs. So what they have to do is make a decision. They can either continue their 7.5 type mechanics here up at the flag stand and fight with everybody else and let the NPCs die, or they can, and maintain flag control, I should mention, or they can give up flag control and keep their flag runner back to heal through the damage that this mesmer is doing. But then, and keep equal footing at the flag stand, but lose control, which is very often the same as losing the game. Or they're forced to send one person back devoted to defending against this while still running the flag, meaning that we're down to kind of a 6.5 situation. Now, on paper, everything is still incredibly equal, very even. Right? You're not gaining a numerical advantage anywhere by doing this. In fact, if anything, the Ranger, which is the best counter to this mesmer, will probably beat the mesmer in a head-on fight. So if anything, you could say that the red team actually benefits from this slightly. However, what can happen is when you have this kind of build that's very dependent on all the pieces of the puzzle being there, pulling one of those pieces of the puzzle out can actually mean a failure. Part of what's good and bad about Guild Wars is that because of those narrow decisions you have to make for those 8 skills on your bar, for each of the 8 members on your team, you need those skills to synergize as well as possible to make kills go through, to make the shutdown necessary to get kills to be complete. However, if you make your skills too synergistic, where you don't actually have any kind of standalone capability, you end up with this effect where if the other team is more modular, where they can pull 1 or 2 or even 3 people out and send them to another side of the map and have both of those sides be self-sufficient, that you can actually end up having an advantage in both locations. So there's this delicate balance of both having your team be very synergistic together and also being modular enough to be able to handle any kind of splits or even to intentionally perform these splits. Although this red team's running a variation of a fairly balanced build, it is a little bit more flag stand oriented because they do have the 2 casters here, and those 2 casters on their own are pretty useless. They're really there to assist the other ones. Most of your damage, your actual direct damage, is coming from these 3 sources. You have some damage and shutdown from the mesmer, but not a lot. And the necromancer is really pure pressure damage. What happens though is that Necromancer synergizes very well with the Ranger. Combined, that's how they apply their pressure. They spread their poison, their bleeding, they get all these conditions running out there that reduce the overall health of the opposing team and keep those monks' energy low. So that way when a spike finally does occur, it's a little bit more of a panic situation, and you can wear their energy down. So by pulling this Ranger back to counter the Mesmer, although the Mesmer may be essentially into a standstill and unable to kill any more NPCs, what happens is you actually gain this huge advantage for your flag stand team. Because although they have an equality numerically, the quality of their team drops significantly. And so that tactic of splitting off and just trying to kill NPCs in the back of the base actually has a little bit more of a deeper intention to it. The NPCs in the back of the base, as I said, are actually not that important. But if the red team leaves them alone long enough, they'll become important, and they'll open themselves up to a very big vulnerability. So, ultimately, try to think, before you use a tactic, such as splitting off, or before doing attacks at different bases, whatever game or situation you might want to apply this to, think about what those tactics buy you, and whether the tactic on its own is going to justify its means, or if the implications of that tactic are really going to be what you're looking for. Because again, these two NPCs that the Mesmer killed earlier, they really don't matter in the course of this game. Pulling that Ranger back, forcing them to give up flag stand control because the Ranger didn't come back soon enough, that is what led them to winning the game here. Now, the other thing I do want to mention, although the blue team is going to very decisively win this game, as we're going to see here in another minute or two, something that's very important to get into that competitive mindset, to begin thinking competitively, is not to worry so much about the outcome. The outcome of any individual game is not important. When you're thinking competitively, you're always thinking about the next game. You're thinking about how you're going to be better next time you play. You're not worried about whether this game works now. Right? They could have executed this tactic and had things gone horribly. And that's okay. There's a learning experience of any kind of failure, especially when it's something that you're trying out for the first time, that you know has sound principles. Sound principles are the core of thinking competitively. Obviously, that's incredibly important. You don't just want to try random things and hope they work. You want to have things that are principled, and you want to have things that generally have multiple purposes to them. However, when you're trying those things out for the first time, be okay with failure. And at the same time, don't be content with a mediocre victory. If you won the game, but the tactic itself was not executed that well, or did not seem that helpful, don't worry about the tactic. Alright? Don't base the success of your tactics solely off the result of the game, unless you're going to do it over the course of many, many games. Don't be content with mediocre victories. Always think about how you can optimize and how you can improve. This blue team, although they're still going to win the game, actually almost give it up here for a little while. They take some deaths, they start to get pushed out of the base, and it came very close to red being able to start to make a comeback. But because of some failures on red's part, looks like they had another member that wasn't part of their normal team, the blue still ends up winning. However, I would probably label it as a little bit of a mediocre victory. And so, when this blue team goes back and watches the game, when they discuss the game here afterward, they're probably not going to be content with that. because these are good players. These are players that think competitively, that care about the competitive nature of the game. And so it's not okay to just be happy with the fact you won. It all comes down to whether or not you played your best and whether or not the strategies you employed were something that you want to employ again. So here we're going to see the team wrap up, and shortly after, they will win the game, but do try to keep that mindset of improvement in mind.